Thank you. It was certainly an impressive and thorough presentation. Do we have any council members that would like to ask questions at this time? Go ahead.
Well, for the record, I don't know if I have to do this. I did meet with Todd, and we discussed some of the things, some of the challenges I had with the water. I think everybody knows how I feel about the water. I really don't want to lose it, but I would be open to at least looking into, see what the numbers are. I really want to see the numbers in the budget. I love our water system. I think we have two of the most brilliant minds. I think we lost one of the brilliant minds who now runs Toho, but so I think we do have the leadership in place. We have two great people with water. I think we're running into some problems, and I really want to see the numbers crunched on both sides. I want to see what the city of St. Cloud, what our debt's going to end up being down the road, and then if we do feel like we have to pass it on, then we need to take a look at all those numbers as well, and what we're going to lose in the JPA, and what we're going to lose as leadership for St. Cloud. So, thank you.
Ladies first.
Go ahead. It's a workshop. You go first.
Okay. Okay. So a lot of thanks for your time. A lot of what was discussed to me is a lot of it's the floor of what we would need to make sure that anything would happen. Employees are taken care of. Ratepayers, as you guys call them, we call them citizens and constituents. That's a big difference for me with us being on the dais, representing them as elected officials is different than appointed officials, and that's kind of one of my biggest challenges with the OUC agreement, which I guess this is kind of being modeled along the same lines. We can't sell the utilities, so it would be a management type agreement. Is that right?
There's an option to sell it, however, it requires a referendum vote of the citizens and the 66 and 2/3% vote.
Okay, so I guess we do have two options. Good.
Yeah. And yes, this would be modeled after similarly, but with the key difference being that the maintenance of the seat at the table on the board.
Yeah, which that's extra little nuance, but it's not. It was advisory, right? It doesn't vote.
No, you would have two appointed board seats.
Two appointed board seats, and then one of us.
And then one of you that would also sit and be able to comment, but the ex officio members are non-voting.
Okay. One of the annexation requirement that we have, I'm not the biggest fan of that tactic for getting certain development standards. I think we should just have those better development standards as part of the code. So that's something that I don't really put too much value on. For us, I mean, we go through the budget every year, and staff goes through it essentially every day. This budget balances because of these enterprise funds and the transfers from those enterprise funds. If it was just based on ad valorem, we can't cover police and fire and anything. So it's just one of those of we have to take care to make sure that we maintain those transfers at the highest level possible, while also providing quality service at a rate that doesn't break the bank for residents. One question: would Kissimmee or Osceola County get any extra transfers based on City of St. Cloud coming over, or is it just kind of based on draw the line where that goes?
Just based on your service territory.
Okay,
so no,
because
they would not.
I have a feeling there are in other utility type agreements like this, whoever the first one is gets a little bit extra once anything else gets bolted on.
It's not structured that way. There are opportunities if St. Cloud wanted to have some exposure to the county as a whole. That would be a possibility of discussing it, but we anticipated that the most likely scenario would be that St. Cloud would prefer to have their utility boundary and recover the revenues that are generated from within that boundary. So that's the way that I presented as the most likely path forward.
Okay. And I don't know on the rate reduction, I believe some of that's just going to be based on there's no inside the city or outside the city ratepayer. It's all one ratepayer. So 30%, 40% of the meters are outside the city getting charged a 25% surcharge. Those instantly go down 25%, right? Is that kind of what goes into that calculation?
That we went through a model that basically took every customer that you have and looked at their bill and put it onto a rate proposal. So it's one example of a rate proposal. So that 75 to 85%, we didn't look at it specifically inside the city or outside the city limits. The vast majority of your customers use, similarly to ours, use less than 5,000 gallons a month, and that's where most of the rate reductions exist, is in those lower uses. Toho has generally some higher rates in our conservation tiers, so our higher usage tiers, which we think is very beneficial to extending our water supply, being able to meet demands at a lower cost. And so but most of the benefit exists in those lower usage tiers. But we have done that model, and one of the things, if we were to move forward, we're happy to provide is a model that allows anyone to ask themselves, what would this mean for me? Because we certainly understand that it's not just a city council decision, that you're making that decision on behalf of your customers, your citizens, that are going to want to know, what does this mean for me personally?
Okay. And then when looking at these figures, to me, right now with the water, we'll call it quality issues, we have a mess on our hands, and you guys will be putting a ton of money in contingency with this to try to clean that up. You guys don't know how much that would be. We're putting millions of dollars in every year to try to get this resin out of the system. I mean, that's one of those of, I almost feel like we need to clean up the mess first and then kind of have a fruitful discussion about this, so it's not clouded by that cleanup.
Yeah, that's not actually the way we're looking at it. We're taking your budget as a starting point. And so we have not, when we've done this rate analysis, we have used your budget estimation. So your numbers, the things that we have looked for in terms of cost savings are potential reductions in future positions that we don't think we would need, some of the reductions in costs associated with those duplicated services. Most of the cost benefit that occurs to both St. Cloud and to Toho exists in some of those capital projects, and many of those are growth related. But as an example, one of the things would be, in your capital program, you have significant expansions of utilities throughout your eastern corridor between your plants and the growth that's further east. Because we have plants further east, we've probably got the ability to eliminate some pump stations, to pipe upsizing, some things like that, because we would be better diversifying that plant portfolio. So it's not as much that because from a practical standpoint, yes, and especially as a smaller utility that is having to deal with the challenges that you deal with, it is costly. In the overall magnitude of your capital program, that's not the primary driver. Mm-hmm. And so we're not sitting here loading up these cost estimates, and we're working off of the budgets that you have planned for your organization.
Okay. And to me, some of that is also, whenever the map was carved up, splitting it at 192 doesn't make sense, because you have to put a line down 192, over like in Harmon area. You have to put a line down 192, so do we, to serve half the side of the road. So are there opportunities to do swaps instead? For some of those areas, just to make sure that we are putting capital and infrastructure in areas that make sense for us, and then that would make sense for you guys as well.
There's always some opportunities for that. I don't think they can get even remotely close to the type of capital cost savings that we think can occur for a fully integrated system. But going back to St. Cloud and Toho have worked together for 15 years to have interconnections, to do periodic service area swaps. We've been negotiating one here recently. So those are hard to do on a very large scale, but from a practical standpoint, yes, nothing changes in terms of our willingness to work with St. Cloud on those types of things that benefit both utilities, but there is some notable limits into how effectively you can operate as two distinct utilities. So it would not get to the full level of capital cost reduction that you would have as a single integrated utility.
Understood. And Wendy, I'm throwing out a number just to see if it makes sense in your head. I just pulled it up out of the CAFR. Was the transfer last year in the water 1.1 million about, and then the sewer 1.1 million out of the 14.5 million each?
Yes, sir. The transfer for the water division was 1,271,372, and then in the sewer it was another 1,233,425.
Okay, and that's the number we're talking about of what Toho would transfer, kind of as that starting point.
Yes, sir, and they've already had fiscal year 22 budgets already, so that they can parallel to, as well as actual performances for the last 2 years as well, in all categories, both revenue and expenditure, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then right now, outstanding 2030, we have about $40 million in debt in water and sewer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And while I did not specifically cover that, as part of those assumptions is that we would buy down that debt, because your budget assumes all of the repayment of that debt. And so as we've assumed that, buying down that debt is something that's factored into all of the numbers and the pro forma that I laid out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to clarify, buying down the debt means you're paying it off? Or what does buying down the debt mean?
Yeah, most likely. So there's two different ways to do it. We can either just continue to pay it and it exists, or we can rebond it underneath Toho. So yes, it can go either way.
Okay. For the record, I also met with Mr. Swingle a few weeks ago and talked about this. So one of the big topics we've talked about in my tenure on council is, what's the city limit and where's the water limit, and, do we need to look at our service area? And, I've always been very concerned about Cypress Lakes and that impending cost to the city. I think today's dollars is $60-70 million. That only gets us to 2040. And then, our annual budget isn't that large. So, $60 million is a lot of money. So one of the questions I had when I met with them was, how do we deal with development standards? I know the way we've been doing it in the past is with the water and sewer agreement. I don't know. I agree with Mr. Trace. I don't know that that's the most appropriate way to go about doing that, but that's the way it's been done in the city. So I think one of the big conversations that we would have to have is with the county, and we are having intergovernmental meetings with them to kind of put down, like what Mr. Trace said, I think we need the appropriate development standards, not using the water and sewer agreement to go after that. One of your slides, and I'm sure, I just want to clarify this, but one of the slides had 20 years on there, but this pilot program would be, it doesn't have a sunset.
It does not. That's correct. So now the way we structured it with Kissimmee was that it was the 20-year at that guarantee, and then after that, then it moved to the straight. It's 12% as long as revenue is aligned. But what we that 20-year piece is guaranteeing that regardless of our investment that we're making, that we're guaranteeing that minimum transfer would occur for that time period.
Okay. And then I had asked a similar question to Ms. Collazo, was about, I know there was the conversation about setting the floor for the general fund transfer in the agreement, and I said, okay, is that a good number? I don't know, so we went back the last few years just to make sure that that number was an appropriate amount. And one of the items is we're saying that the employees would be taken care of. I know that's important for all of us, and would go over to work for TWA but still be on the retirement program of the city of St. Cloud. And is that at the same pay?
Yes.
Okay. So you would take the positions and at the same pay. And then would they be housed over here still? Or, maybe you haven't figured out any of those kind of details.
It's a great question. So this, obviously, a transition of this nature is a significant undertaking. So I would envision that there would truly be a transition period that would house your employees in your existing facilities, being City Hall, your joint use facility, things of that nature. We do have a facilities master plan that we're developing, which part of that anticipates that even for our own needs, that we anticipate building facilities on the eastern portion of our service territory. If we were to integrate with St. Cloud, we would have that discussion about what made sense. I would envision that we would build a facility that would house Toho's employees. Don't know exactly where, but most likely over on the east side of St. Cloud, because that would allow us to support St. Cloud, Harmony area, Sunbridge, and even up into our BVL area.
So, a lot of good things have been said in the presentation, and even when we met, the employees are taken care of, the pensions are protected, the rates would be reduced. Those are all positives. One of our major challenges we have right now is like Mr. Trace had mentioned, the issues with our water and the resin. And so that would be of concern to me to make sure that that's continued to be prioritized like for us, it's a priority, and we spend a lot of time and energy and effort and funds trying to fix the problem. So that would be something for me. But I agree with Mr. Askew. I mean, I think, and Mr. Trace, I think they're both saying, I would like to see specifics and details and all that to be able to really fully evaluate it. You know, a lot of the, like I said, you're protecting the employees, protecting the pensions, reducing the rates to the citizens. You know, those are all good bullet points. But until we see like the details of an agreement, you know.
And I would like to respond to the water quality question. Absolutely. That water quality is one of our primary topics of focus for, and really for any utility. And so as an integrated utility, that has to be one of the top priorities. And I think that's an area where, again, the additional scale and resourcing helps out, because the workload, the going through the flushing programs, making sure that those are aggressive, that puts a significant burden on the staff, and especially as a staff of a smaller utility. So having those additional resources is something that I think is very beneficial in order to be able to sustain an aggressive response to addressing those issues.
Thank you. That's it for me.
I'd like to also state that I met with Todd and one of the board members to talk about some questions, concerns that I had. You know, my number one concern is that we take care of our residents, that first of all, we provide quality water, which includes cleaning up the challenges that we have now, and knowing that if we did make this transition, that, you know, that kind of service would continue. I'm very thankful for Marjorie and her leadership and the staff and how hard they've worked, and I would certainly have no doubts or expect that to continue. To me, a huge advantage that certainly has, I think, all of our interests is being able to lower rates. I know it's easy to promise residents when you're in a campaign, we're going to do our best to lower rates, but when you get in here and you see all the challenges that you have and the expenses and so on, it's just not quite as easy as people think it is. But if we could lower rates, I mean, that would just be a huge win for all of our rates. I mean, all of our residents. I'd certainly want to see some paperwork that our staff had worked on with you to see that they felt that was certainly going to be something that would take place. I certainly also echo what we've already heard. We want to take care of our employees. You know, they are, you know, their pension funds, their health insurance, and that they're served well. I guess if I just had to sum up one last thing, it would be taking care of our city. You know, we certainly receive a significant source of revenue from our water, and as the city around us, and especially in our JPA area, continues to expand, because that's going to happen whether we want it or not, to know that we would be able to tap into that continuing revenue. I'm deeply concerned about our debt and the size of our utility handling the debt that we have, especially with the Cypress Lake project and our own capital needs, and just maintaining what we have. And so that I would certainly be in favor of moving forward and at least having a presentation from you and our staff working together, bringing forward some type of formal agreement with numbers worked out that they've hammered out and worked out, and certainly having our city attorney looking all of this over to make sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. So that's where I'm at. Do we have a consensus that we would be willing for the staff to move forward?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I guess we kind of started on second base on some of this. This is a management agreement. Is that the case?
I think that's the quickest and most efficient way to get it done, yes.
Okay. So what would it be prudent to look at what a sale would look like if that's something that is another option? Like if it's truly to just take debt off the books and get extra revenue, go to a referendum on selling, or, I mean, it's kind of interesting of the management side of things only takes 3 people when the referendum is, 30,000 people it takes to get convinced. So it's just one of those of we kind of glossed over that part.
Well, there are ways, and Mr. Sturgeon and I have talked about, there's ways to value the system for a straight sale, if that's what the council would like. You can go through and try to do that analysis and get a feel for what that would be.
Right, because we're almost sole sourcing something, right? We're taking, all right, our closest neighbor, let's go through this management agreement, get an annuity going, and we get a couple $1 million a year to help balance the budget. I mean, that's what.
Calling it a management agreement might be just a little bit too
I distill things down too much sometimes,
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it's really, what it is it's an interlocal agreement between two public entities that are working together to basically to provide the same service. So it's as similar as if the city of Kissimmee and the city of St. Cloud got together and worked on something that jointly benefits them. It's the same similar. They're both providing a public service from a provision of services perspective. So it actually would be an interlocal agreement between the two entities that dealt with basically administration of the city and provision of the service, administration of the system and provision of the service.
Because to me, it's, if you look at the OUC agreement, the ability to untangle that is almost impossible. And, it's just one of those of, so we keep on renewing it 10, 20 years at a time because it's difficult to
And I'll just remind
untangle.
from a historic perspective, when the city entered into the agreement with OUC, the ability to untangle it in the first few years was not the way it is right now.
Yeah.
So there wasn't an earlier, quicker ability to get out of the agreement if the city felt like it wasn't working for it. It only became more complicated to sort of, as you were to untangle it as the system went on and as improvements and assets were put in by the city, by OUC, that increased the value of their investment. But had the city at that point, back in 1996, in the first few years of it, realized it wasn't working for the city and the city wanted to take back full control of its electric utility, it could have done that a lot easier than it could now.
So I just want to make sure we put all that on the table of, it's not just one thing or the other, or yes or no.
Mayor?
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just to add on to that point, I mean, that's the reason fighting for the water, because if you do let someone manage it, you can call it what you want. Once you get a hold of that, there's no way we're going to be able to purchase it back. I mean, OUC, I don't know what they got, 300 million assets in there. We'll never be able to get that back, although that agreement's working out good. That's what concerns me, is that when the water and Toho's a great service. I have nothing against Toho. I'm speaking for the citizens. I want to make sure everything's laid out, the employees, all that, so we can make the right decision, because that decision, that's it. You're not getting your water back. Once you let that go, it's gone. So I like the idea of the possible sale. It seems like,
I
all
wasn't
the costs.
suggesting that. I was just
Right.
throwing it out.
Well, just all the costs that our citizens have paid in taxes to build this system, it just feels like we're just going to let it go. But I would like to see the numbers. That's from both sides.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time. I'll work with the city manager to identify a
And the
time
staff.
to bring staff to bring back a more formalized proposal.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all the time and the effort and research. I know this has been a lot of work and a lot of time put into this, and we look forward to seeing what
Thank you.
You're going to bring forward. Thank you very much, and thank your
Thank you.
board members who are here. Thank you.